Hello, my name is Eric Willison. This is the second video in the series that I'm doing on the Second Amendment. We're breaking this up into 3 videos because when people see a 45-minute long video or an hour-long video, they often will just be overwhelmed by it and they don't have an hour. So we'll break it up into 3, and if you want to watch all 3, you certainly can. In the previous video, I did a textual analysis of the Second Amendment and showed how from the text that the text supports the interpretation of the Second Amendment as acknowledging an individual right of the people to bear arms, and that the gun controllers' ideas about it, that it merely just sets up the right of the government to have a militia or a National Guard, doesn't make any sense. Now, from a point of view of common sense, you will often have people who support gun control asking you some questions. And they'll say something like, why do you need a gun? Why do you need an assault rifle? Why do you need this sort of weapon or that sort of weapon? Sometimes the best answer to a question is to pose a different but highly similar question right back to them. So you might ask them, why do you need to go to church? Why do you need free speech? Why do you need to be treated equally under the 14th Amendment? Why do you need to peaceably assemble? Why do you need freedom of the press? Why do you need to be free of unreasonable searches and seizures? You get the idea. The question then is, what is it about these other rights that if you were denied those rights, you would, what? Suddenly stop breathing? You'd have a heart attack? You'd have a stroke and die? Your arm would fall off? If you were treated unequally? No, none of that is true. And that's because a right is not a need, and a need is not a right. Why do you need to have an abortion? That's not the question. It's not about need. It's about your rights. And while we're at it, why do you gun controllers need to interpret all of the Bill of Rights as broadly as possible, except the Second Amendment, and that one you want to interpret as narrowly as possible? Why do you need to interpret it so narrowly? Why can't you be consistent? Perhaps it's too much to ask. Another problem with gun control is the racist roots of gun control. You see, the first gun control laws that came out were in the post-Civil War South, and surprise, 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 it was a bunch of Democrats who passed laws saying that black people can't own guns. Now, why would the Southern Democrats want to disarm black people from owning guns? That's because you've got the paramilitary wing of the Democrat Party, which was the Ku Klux Klan, founded by a Democrat named Nathaniel Bedford Forrest, who once famously said that the key to victory in battle is to get there thustus with the mostest men. But you see, the Ku Klux Klan, they rode around wearing these white sheets. And while these white sheets would certainly protect their identities, they would not protect them from bullets. Now, I wasn't around back then, but it would seem to me that it must have been a great deal more difficult and dangerous to hang a man from a tree if he had a loaded rifle. You can sort of picture the scene, right? Okay? You know, a few Klansmen ride up to some guy's house, and he comes out, he's got his rifle pointed at him, and the head Klan leader says, "All right now, who's going to take Clarence's rifle away from him?" Anyone? Anyone? No takers. Who would have guessed? So, the very fundamentals of gun control started off with a racist ideology to take away the guns from the people who were demanding and deserving of equality after being enslaved for hundreds of years. Now, the next argument that you see from these liberals is equally contradictory and nonsensical, and I sort of call this the Dodge City argument. They say, well, if you're going to get rid of gun control, it's going to turn everything into the wild, wild west. Everything's going to be Dodge City. You're going to have shootouts in the streets. There's going to be guns going off all the time at all hours. People getting shot right and left. Well, let's use our critical thinking. And let's look at the states that earliest on passed laws based upon freedom of gun rights. So you've got states like Virginia, you've got states like Texas, Florida, Arizona. A lot of these are open carry. A lot of these are extremely broad as far as concealed carry permits, things like that. And what we find is that all of the liberals' predictions when those rules went through to make these states so much more gun friendly, all of the liberals' predictions about Dodge City and the wild, wild west didn't happen. Didn't happen. Instead, you've got an armed society being a polite society. But the exact opposite happened and happens, present tense, in the states and areas where you have very, very strict gun control laws. You've got shootings all the time in Chicago, every day of the week. And yet, guns are illegal in Chicago. You've got shootings all the time in New York City, in Washington, D.C. You've got all these areas where you've got very, very strict gun control, and that's where you see Dodge City. That's where you see the Wild West, minus the horses, of course. Now, speaking of the Wild West, we've got sort of there's a saying out west that God made man, that Samuel Colt made him equal. And what they're saying, of course, is that guns even the playing field. For instance, most women are no match physically for a 260-pound linebacker who is intent upon stalking and breaking into their house and beating them up or raping them or worse. They're no match physically. But I don't know any 260-pound linebacker that is a match for even a 90-pound woman who has a .38 and it's loaded in her hand. No match at all. In areas where elderly people can wield more than a cane and pull out a pistol, you don't see those elderly people getting beaten up. You don't see them getting mistreated and abused, or worse, assaulted, all that sort of stuff, robbed. The younger, healthier people don't quite see them as the easy marks in areas where they might be packing. So all you leftists, you may want to call the police when you hear that window downstairs breaking at 3 a.m. But I'm not going to be real satisfied with the chalk outline that the police will draw around my dead body. They always get my stomach wrong. The bulge there, it's just not right. I would rather have the police drawing the chalk outline around the person trying to break into my home. I think that's where the real artistry lies, and that's my personal preference. And that's what having a gun will help with.